Hi, I'm Dave Robinson, Chief Data Scientist at DataCamp, and I'm excited to do this second screencast where I'll be live analyzing a dataset I haven't seen before. So each dataset comes from the Tidy Tuesday project, and I'm excited about this one. All I know about is the title, but I know that it's on topic for the end of October. We're looking at horror movie Prophet. So I'm really excited to dive into that dataset and see what it's all about and what we're going to learn together about it. All right. So, let's see. I'm going to start by let's find out. Oh, it's all about our scary movies, the best investment in Hollywood. Looks like we've got 8 columns, and the raw data. Click here for it. Movieprofit.csv. Looks like that'll be the raw data. What I like to do with raw data is I'll click it, click raw, and select the URL. And now I'm going to go into my new project, an R markdown file, where I'm going to load in the Tidyverse package, and then load in our spooky data set of movie profits. I'm going to call it Movie Profit. Okay. Got some parsing failures. We can look at those in a bit. I'm going to explore the data first, see if it looks reasonable. All right. And if I take this and view it, about 7,500 rows, looks like 1 row per movie, about which we have a release date, but it's not in a great format, so we're going to need to parse that. We have the distributor, the rating, the genre, and we're probably going to be finding horror movies among those. The domestic and worldwide gross, looks like some of them are 0. This is a future one. Probably going to need to clean that out, clean the ones that haven't come out yet. We have production budgets, domestic and worldwide gross. All right, not too many columns. Rating, I know we're going to have to control for that. R-rated movies tend to make less money. Genre, title. All right, looks like that first one is a row name. When I parse this, I'm probably going to say row names. What do I say? I say row names equals true. That's not even a thing we do here. It doesn't read CSV. I'm just going to select out forget out X1, not an important column. That's good. I'm also going to parse the release date as part of this cleaning process. So I use parse date time. So I'm going to want to use library lubridate, date and time, and I say out of release date. And despite using this all the time, I keep forgetting the particular pattern of how to parse a month, day, year out. It'll be, let's see, month, it will be, all right, looks like M exclamation point. And day is, all right, I like that. It'll be, I think it goes, the format is, and here, this is the kind of thing I just try out and sometimes have to experiment with a bit. %D, I think capital Y if it's all 4, but we're going to find out the exciting way together. And it's called release date. That looks pretty good. The one exception is that, it's parse date time. I just want parse date because otherwise it gets me midnight in every date. It does not like that at all. Let me figure out what I did wrong here. Parse date. Parse date format equals. Maybe I got the wrong parse date. Oh boy, look at me, not doing the best job of cleaning this data. And I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to do as date of parse date time because that worked. Maybe I'll come back later and clean that up. But yeah, right now I've turned it from a character string into a date. Could have done better at that cleaning step. So now we have date, movie, production budget. All right, whenever I see these numeric columns, production budget, domestic gross, I want to filter one more thing. I'm going to filter for movies released, release date. I'm going to say let's skip this whole year because this whole year you could be releasing more movies. So I want to move the one, pardon me, making more money. So I'm going to say up to 2017. Maybe come back and look at 2018 data. Probably not. All right, now I've got 8 columns. Release date, movie, production budget, domestic gross. I've got 3 interesting numbers that I want to take a look at. Whenever I want to look at a numeric column, I'm going to look at production budget. I'm going to look at a histogram in ggplot 2. I like to set my themes before I run it and see histogram of production budgets. Almost any time you see money, you're going to want to put it on the x-axis on a log scale. We see sort of log normal distribution here. Now it's not perfectly log normal. This looks like I'm going to throw the labels. I'm going to throw in the scales package and I'm going to separate a setup chunk from our data processing chunk. And I'm going to say dollar format. I like that. $1 million, $10 million. Looks like the modal budget was between $10 and $30 million. And let's see. I have a suspicion that the reason it's not log normal is we have different distributors here, some of which are much larger than others. How many distributors do we have in this? Well, let's look at count, distributor, sort equals true. To explore the data a little more. 298. Whenever I have this many distributors, I'm always going to want to lump the ones that aren't the most common. I really think these first 6 everyone's going to recognize up to Walt Disney. I don't even know what 1.0 means. I don't think that's a studio name. I don't know what that's fitting into here. And but we're going to lump everything besides the first 6. This is making me realize I want to separate my steps. I want movie profit raw to be read in, and then I want to create the movie profit data set with movie profit raw afterwards. This is going to give me a lot of leeway that I can rerun this movie profit step later. What other cleaning do I want to do? I want to take distributor. I'm going to actually do it in the same mutate I was doing up here, but I'm going to move the mutate till after the filter. I like to do my filtering before I do my changing of columns. I'm going to say distributor equals FCT lump, really handy. I used it in the last screencast. And say distributor, and what do I say? N equals, I think if I say 6, it's going to be the 6 most common along with other. So now if I count distributor sort equals true, it gives me 7 and the missing values. I'm gonna remind myself if there's a way to handle that in FCT lump. There isn't. That's okay. Some of them have missing values. So if 6 main ones. 6 main ones does not look the same as when I counted it before. Let me try removing this a moment. I saw Warner Brothers, Sony, Universal, Paramount. Oh, this was the 6th most common. Oh, and Walt Disney. I think since I did the filter, something might have changed here. And 1.0. What are these numbers? I'm going to take a quick look at the original data. And I'm curious, we have Walt Disney. Where can I find 25.0? All right, this is strange data that's coming in where we actually say, here the distributor is a company called Polygram. Here is 25.0. This one is 2.0. I'm now noticing something interesting about this data. There's actually 2 rows here. One for Mighty Joe Young, it says 25.0. The other says Walt Disney. And I'm noticing Little Nicky, we have 2 rows for it. And yeah, this is some strange data. It looks like it's usually duplicated. I'm actually going to take a quick look at our data set and say if I count the movie, sort equals true, yeah, we have a lot of duplicates here. Let's check on the documentation, see if it mentions anything about it. Otherwise, I'm probably going to be just directly removing that data, but I want to see if it can tell me why why we have these duplicate rows. It is not telling me, yeah, it's not telling me anything about that. I think looks like not great data. Oh, unless there's sequels. Is this about sequels? Oh, maybe it's about multiple, well, like for example, multiple Halloween movies. Let's take a look. Since this is Halloween, it's important that we figure out what Halloween and Carrie each represent. So if I filter for movie equals Halloween, figure out what's going on with that data. I actually get 2 Halloween movies that duplicate up. We get each of them having a bunch of distributors. Okay, and it's multiple. So we have multiple NPA ratings. This is some not so clean data. Usually when I see like the data this bad, I'm gonna want to. In this case, I probably want to keep one of these rows, and in these cases, really want to drop that. I'm gonna take. And now if I take a, I gotta take a look at Carrie. 18.0, 6.0. Okay. There were 2 carries, but there are 8 carries here. And before I saw that Mighty Joe Young popped up twice in the data set. And same data, except here the MPA rating was incorrectly stated as 1998, and here it's stated as this is the better row. So in this case, there's a good row and a bad row. The good row comes second. All right. I'm going to look for one of those other ones that was counted so I can just get one more feel. 10 Commandments. Came out twice. That is 2 different versions, that's totally fine, except that, yep, sometimes the MPA rating gets a year. Sometimes it gets, which it shouldn't be getting, and sometimes it gets the actual rating. I'm starting to lean towards understand, though the data doesn't have to be perfect for me to explore, but I'm probably going to spend about 5 minutes cleaning it before I jump any further. So let's take a quick look at the, one more look at the raw data. There were a lot of warnings when I read this in, so I'm going to take a quick look at the problems that it's associated with movie profit raw. No trailing characters. Well, domestic gross. That's actually, it looks to me like it did fine parsing those. All the problems with domestic gross. That's not what's popping up as a problem here. If I look at the original data and I look for, say, Mighty Joe Young, yeah, I'm seeing, it had 2 genres. Okay. All right, and if I take a quick look at Halloween, a lot of movies with Halloween in the name. Yeah, I see an action and horror rows for the movie Halloween, and multiple distributors, even within each date. Okay. I'll tell you what I'll do now. I'm going to want only one row for every movie that pops up multiple times. Often want the last ones. Looks like in Halloween, the last one's the last one here, Universal R Horror, is one of the better ones. Often it's got a bad one first, good one after. Okay. Last House on the left pops up 3 times. The last one that's best, that has Universal R Horror. I'm gonna try and go I'm gonna go through a data cleaning step here. Now I learn I need to make Jenny Bryan happy and save my my file as I go. And here it is. I am going to do a distinct. I'm going to reverse these. I'm going to arrange in descending row number, which is a way of reversing the order of my rows, and then distinct every combination of movie, that's the title, and release date, with keep all equals true. So what I'm going to do is I'm keeping the last version of each, because I first sorting in descending order, and then keeping the first one. Now, if I count movie, I see a lot of these are movies that I know came out twice. like Halloween, like Carrie had the remake, I do feel better about this. And if I counted by both movie and release date, it never has duplicates.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, pardon me? Yeah. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to treat this data as good enough. I'd like to start exploring it. We may come back and grab a better variation of some of these. It looks like there may be some corrupted data within this data set. Very typical if we're starting to analyze something. All right. We still have these 31s, these 1.0s. Again, we might come back to it. I'm going to leave in that line where I did mutate distributor equals FCT lump of distributor 6. Now if I count this, I like this data more. A few missing, a lot of others, 6 big distributors. If I tried this histogram, I'm going to turn it into a box plot. I'm going to say, I want to know based on the distributor, which distributors had made more money than others. Put the y-axis in a log scale when we're in a box plot. What it looks like, aha, we definitely see that I'm going to coord flip so this is a lot easier to read. Ones that have missing distributors, way less money. Makes sense. Ones that are the other category, wide variety, but generally lower budget. And then all our major studios, Warner Brothers, Universal, Paramount Pictures, with a couple of exceptions, high production budget. There's definitely time is going to play another role here. We're going to need to see that when we explore it. That's good to know. Okay, that was production budget. I'm going to copy and paste the exact same box plot, but this time find out the worldwide gross. Similar, we see that missing makes the least, that ones that we don't know the distributor make the least money. There are not a lot of those. We probably filter them out. It's not a big deal. And then ones that 20th Century Fox through Warner Brothers generally made a lot. This is all on a log scale. It's all compressed across time. We're going to need to return to that. But we've been looking at distributors so far, and it sounds like what we're really interested in is what genres make the most money. We're probably interested in what make the most profit from an original investment, not just the most overall box office gross. So I'm going to start with this. I'm actually going to start by finding out how many genres there are. I'm going to count the genre. Just 5. Makes it really easy. We don't need to do any lumping. I'm going to copy my box plot logic and change it to genre. I'm going to start with production budget. Adventure cost the most on median. Comedy, drama, action, horror. I'm going to actually throw in a step here where I mutate the genre to be the reordered genre by production budget. It's nice. We saw this last screencast. I kind of sort this. All right. This is on a log scale, so a small difference can make here can make a big difference in real money. This might be doubling the median budget. Yeah. All right. That's interesting. We're also not looking at time at all. And that's something we really have to explore, especially if these aren't adjusted for inflation, which I don't know that they are. I can take a quick look at the data. Doesn't mention anything about it. All right. So what I'm going to do now is say, let's take a look at time. Budgets over time. We've got release date here. And in particular, I'm going to say, I'm going to sort it by decade. That is, pardon me, group it by decade. I'm going to say decade is, we have lubridate, so we can get the year of a release date. And we can round it to the, well, I'm going to actually, I'm going to round it to the lower one, which is a bit of a trick. I can do 10 times the floor of that divided by 10. And now if I count the decades, we actually get the first decade before this point, the latest decade before this point. Now I see a 2020. I thought that I filtered out for that, so I'm going to take a quick look. If I say filter decade equals 2020, I see this movie Release date 2020. I said release date is less than 2018. What is that? Sing something? I don't know why this movie, Singularity. Release date. So if I take this and I actually say filter release date less than 2018 or 101, it's gone. So I don't know why I was getting it before. Let me try running this line one more time. Did I possibly just not run that line? No, I ran that line. Filter release. Oh, that was silly of me. I filtered the release date before I turned the release date into a date. All right. Now I can run the up. All right, I like that a lot more. Now if I count by decade, what I see is one movie from 1910, another movie from 1920, and generally more and more movies from each decade. Most of our data we notice right now is from 1970 onward or so. Okay, that's really good to know. If I group by decade, it's really going to be tough to work with time when we're looking mostly from 2000 onward, but I'm going to just get a quick sense of it. If I say summarize, I'm going to summarize at each of the columns of production budget. And when I summarize at, I have to say all the way from, nope, I'm actually not going to do this because I like to, no, I'll do it. I'm going to take from production budget all the way to worldwide gross. And I'm going to take the median of each of those columns. I'm going to need to say NARM equals true. Some of them are going to be missing. This lets me find the median domestic gross, worldwide gross, and production budget all in one graph. So one thing I find here, maybe the data is adjusted for inflation, but the production budget has actually been decreasing a little bit, the median production budget of movies in our data set since 1990s. As has the domestic gross, and the worldwide gross has been pretty steady. This is making me think the data is adjusted for inflation. I think it's very unlikely that would be the case if we were looking at not unadjusted data. Another way I can check whether the data is adjusted for inflation is let's find out the top money-making movies of all time. Let's say descending worldwide gross. Frozen, Minions, Jurassic Park, Star Wars Phantom Menace, maybe that's not adjusted for inflation. A lot of those are newer movies, but we definitely only have a limited data set. A lot of these are coming from the 90s and 2000s. All right, what if I said domestic gross? I can sort this way. Phantom Menace, New Hope. Yeah, the fact that New Hope is up near the top is making me guess these are adjusted for inflation. I know that Star Wars is one of the most money-making movies of all time if you do adjust for inflation. All right, that's interesting. I wonder if I can find that out anywhere. If I go to the article, I'm generally like to avoid the article. I didn't find the word inflation here. Not so sure. Okay, I'll for now I'll take it at its word. I think I'm probably at some point going to want to filter for movies anyway that are only in, say, the last 30 years, or even just the last 10 years. But for now, just to get this idea across, I can make a really neat graph. I can actually say, let's gather, or I should say, with this Halloween, we're going to do a ghastly gather, and later perhaps we'll do a spooky spread. And here I'm going to gather everything besides decade, and plot all three of these into a great line plot. Love doing line plots over time. We say color equals metric. Now I get a sense of typical distributions of these metrics over time. I'm going to quickly throw the y-axis, y, tenuous labels equals dollar format. All right. This is a line graph where we'd say, what's a typical production budget? Median production budget, that is. What is a typical gross? I should probably have filtered out the ones that were really, really rare, these rare decades. I didn't, it's not too crazy down here. Generally, it looks kind of like, for us, the domestic gross peaked in the 70s, which definitely makes me think that this data is adjusted for inflation. Otherwise, that would be pretty strange. And worldwide gross has been flat. All right. I'm going to assume it's adjusted for inflation, which is also going to mostly let me ask my questions like about differences between genres without worrying too much about change over time. Later, I might explicitly filter for movies in the last 10 years and see if that changes my conclusions. Okay. There is so much variation among these 5 genres. I looked at production budget, each of these, and there's so much variation within each genre. A lot of that is probably due to distributor. So I can start by saying, let's see. I can combine both of these into one graph. I can start by, let's see, there are only 5 genres. So I'm actually, but genres are what I'm interested in. I'm going to use faceting to represent another metric, to represent the distributor. And I'm also going to filter where we know for cases where we know the distributor. Now there's going to be 7 facets. Not my favorite number of facets, but at least I can actually tell what some of the differences here are. All right. So I see, for example, that across all 6 of these major studios, action always makes more money. Always costs more money. Action and adventure, generally costing more. And horror, Walt Disney probably producing very few horror movies, looks like. Horror usually costs the least. Okay, that's interesting. And what if I change this? What if I wanted to say, what if I said, let's look at worldwide budget? We're absolutely going to be comparing those two. Worldwide gross. We're absolutely going to be looking at the difference between those two. How much did each movie make over its budget? Before we get to that, let's look at the typical gross. All right, there we're probably going to want to filter out the other. We might need to look at others separately. It's a whole different story. It's like we say here's a longer tail, especially on the lower end. It's rare for a movie made by a major distributor to gross very little money. It's not that strange for an independent distributor. So we might be looking sometimes at just these big distributors. Okay. Let's start talking profit. Let's start talking the difference between a worldwide gross and a production budget. So I'm going to move my what are typical budgets over time down here and say which genres, because we're going to be looking at genres, have the big payoff. So in ratio, so I'm going to say payoff, we're looking at ratio of worldwide gross to production budget. Here I can tell you, we're going to have to be really careful. There's going to be some movie in here with a $1 production budget that makes $1 million. It's going to throw off everything we do. So when I analyze this kind of question, I like to start by, let's start by adding a column. I'm just going to call it profit ratio. I think that kind of gets the idea across. And I'm going to say profit ratio equals worldwide gross divided by production budget. All right, cool. So I can see, for example, here in the first 10 movies we happen to be looking at, we have movies like Cube that made 36 times its budget, movies like I Married a Strange Person in November that lost a little of their money. If I arrange in descending order of profit ratio, we're going to get some infinities here, some with production budget of 0. We're probably just going to want to ignore those. But let's start by looking at, Paranormal Activity and the Blair Witch Project. Those make a lot of sense. We got some horror movies here that are making way more than their original budget. So that is really getting us into the Halloween spirit. The original Halloween, we don't have a domestic gross for it, but we have a production budget. All right. Actually, this is not nearly as strange data as I was thinking. Like making back a few movies, making back a few hundred times their budget makes a lot of sense. This isn't what the article looked at, but I'm also interested in the biggest busts. And these I'm suspicious. We have these movies. 12 Angry Men is a classic. There's no way 12 Angry Men made $0. None of these movies, I think we just got to filter these out. These are bad data. Maybe there's a way to fix it from the original data. I'm going to go ahead and remove it. I'm actually going to remove it all the way up in our cleaning step. We know we don't have every movie of all time, so we shouldn't get too precious about throwing out some movies when we want to. Here we have some movies I've never heard of, which is really kind of the point. These are going to be some really movies that make very, very little money. And all right, what's the general distribution of profit ratios? This I definitely want on a logarithmic scale. There isn't even a question. When you have ratios, they go on a log scale. Otherwise, they're very misleading. And here we have some movies never quite making back 1,000 times their budget, 10 times, 1/10, 1,000th. I wonder how much the median movie makes back. I'd use the summarize verb in the way for that. Median profit ratio, probably above 1, 1.7. All right, median movie makes back a little more than it put in. Okay, let's look at some distributions. I'm going to look at the genre to profit ratio, because this, like I said, I'm pretty sure this is what the article was really getting at, that horror movies have unusually high ratios. Here we go. Yeah, it definitely is the highest, but it's so hard to tell with these distributions. When I look at these distributions, I probably want to, instead of looking at a box plot, which is kind of misleading because we're over several orders of magnitude here. Like this is between lose 9/10 of your money and make your 10 times back. That's a huge gap, but it's only a small part of our graph. I'm going to instead look at the median profit ratio. So I'm going to do median profit ratio equals median of profit ratio, and arrange in descending median profit ratio. All right, the ones that make their money back the most are horror, 2.5 times the average one, adventure, comedy, action, drama. That's pretty interesting. If I were just gonna if I had to stop right now and make one graph, I don't. I'm about halfway through. But if I had to stop, I would probably make a bar plot. I would say, I would definitely code flip it, and I'd put on the y-axis median profit ratio. And I would say, I'd probably say let's make the y-axis labels equals, I can't remember if this is a function, but I would write one myself where I'd say it's x times. Paste your number times x. That is because I want it to be 1x, 2x. That's pretty good. So these are movies that go bust. These are movies that make back your same profit. These are movies that, here we go. Reorder your genre by your median profit ratio. I used a plus instead of a pipe. Horror makes the most money back. That's the way I could look at it. Do these conclusions change if I look in a particular period of time? I'll start very roughly, and I'm probably going to undo this. I'm going to say, what happens if I say release date has been since 2010? Nope, pretty similar ratio. What if I say only, remember I filtered out 2018, only movies released last year? Still pretty steady. If I said, notice I'm doing genre all the way through. I like this graph. I'm going to keep it. I'm even going to promote the profit ratio up to my original data cleaning. And I need to run the data cleaning step. If I want to see if this changed over time, I could group, instead of grouping by genre, I could group by genre and year. And I know as soon as I do this, it's not going to work for every year. I can do, what I would do is change this to genre and year and include the number of movies in each year. I need to define year as, year is a loop date function, year of release date. So I can tell I'm not going to get anything out of knowing that the one action movie released in 1934. It's not useful here. I could filter for years greater than Let's look at the new millennium. Only movie since 2000. Most genre year combinations in this aggregation had, all the action ones have at least 40, 50 movies. I feel better about that. If I arrange by movies, I can see, do any of them have very few? Relatively few in horror. It's worth noting that. It's worth considering that it's going to be higher noise. I still feel kind of good about making a graph out of it. 2000, 2001, having only 8 movies. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and use this and ask the question. Let's see. Most of this is all good. I just need to change this to a geom line. I put the median, I put year on the x-axis, color equals genre. And I need to ungroup after the summarize, otherwise I can't keep editing the genre variable. I got these two, I should have dropped the cohort flip. And I forgot to do a filter. I need to say filter year is greater than or equal to 2000. I neglected to put that back in the code. All right. Aha! Now I see a story. Now I see a story. The story is, for a long time, horror made a little bit more money than the other genres in terms of the ratio of making back its money. But there was a change, like a phase change, a shift. Around 2012, this will be 2013, the first year that the median horror movie made 6 times as much money as it cost. Isn't that something? I wonder if the budgets changed or the money it made back changed. I also wonder if how this relates to distributors. Okay, so horror. This is so interesting. Horror movies started being more profitable around 2013. That's really interesting. All right. My favorite horror movie was Cabin in the Woods. Came out in 2012. I don't think it was too much of a box office smash, but that predated this new, looks like, kind of profit renaissance. All right. 2013. That was when Paranormal Activity came out? Maybe. Maybe that makes some of the difference. All right. Let's look by, I want to look by distributor. One of the problems when I look by distributor is we're going to have way too little data. There were 8 horror movies in some of these years. For distributor, it's going to narrow it way more down. So if I want to look by 3 variables, genre, something distributor, and something about time, I'm going to need to do it by decade. So I'm going to promote my earlier decade analysis. Where did I say decade equals? I'm going to grab this code. I'm going to put it into my original mutate. I can ensure that I always have decade when I want it. And I'm now going to group in this data set by genre, distributor, and decade. I may be able to filter only for 1999 now. I'm going to find out. If I try 1999, pardon me, 1990. This needs to be decade. Okay. And I arrange in ascending order of movies. I still have years with only one movie. Action and adventure, distributor NA is particularly uninteresting. I'm going to throw that into my filter as not is NA distributor. I don't even care if we don't know the distributor, forget about it. So generally it's studios that produce very little horror. That makes sense to me. So we're going to find out which of these, actually in a moment we're going to find out which of these distributors started cranking out horror movies, but first we're going to find out its relationship to median profit ratio. And by that to add another variable to this analysis, we're going to facet by distributor. I'm going to do, I seem to be missing something here. Oh, decade. X-axis needs to be decade, not year. I realize we have 7. Ooh, this is a pretty clear story. I'm going to get right back to you, Paranormal Activity. The clear story here. One thing is I've probably got to drop Walt Disney out of this. if I'm looking at horror movies, it doesn't make sense to keep including Walt Disney that had so few horror movies in this period of time. That means when I do FCT lump, I probably want to change the FCT lump to only have 5. Because I just happen to remember that Walt Disney was the 6th. We can drop it out. The graph looks better. Everyone looks happier, except we still have this situation going on. All right, isn't that something? That is going to be Paranormal Activity. If I arrange in ascending order of movies, of number of movies, we find out that twice, in 3 cases, there were only 2 horror movies in a whole decade. Oh, this is maybe Blair Witch Project, now that I'm thinking about it. We'll get back to Paranormal Activity. All right. I can't do much with these, with this movie by distributor data, at least in terms of if I look at a median of only a handful of numbers, I'm going to need to start adding confidence intervals. This confidence interval is going to be too wide. I'm not crazy about it. I'm going to stop asking myself which distributors have made a profit and start just asking the question, where are the horror movies coming from? All right, this is actually a more basic question than our profit question. So instead I'm going to say, what are the most common genres over time? I should have looked at this first. That's a pretty typical movie. Is I dive into a question I'm interested in before I ask these questions about counts. So I'm going to take our movie profit, count decade and genre. In a moment, I'll probably do year, and ask myself, by decade, colored by genre, how many movies of each genre are coming out? And what I really see is most of our data is relatively recent. It happens from 2000 through to the 2010 decade. And is the ratio changing? To ask that, I'm going to change this from being a graph of lines of number over time to grouping by decade, adding a percent column where I say n divided by some n, turn to a percent. Change this to percent, and throw in a scale y percent format. Start asking what movies make up a different percentage. All right, so now we have which movies make up, and it turns out it looks like our old data, we mostly have action. I'm not going to say there used to be more action movies because we know this data set does not include all movies, only 7,500. Most of our old movies are action. And for the last 3 decades, the breakdown of horror, comedy, drama, adventure really kind of has been staying steady. So it's not necessarily about the number, or perhaps by distributor. So I'm going to ask what distributors make the most movies most of each genre as a separate question. Count by distributor and genre. And here, this is a really classic case for a faceted bar plot. We have 2 options of what to put on the x-axis, the genre or the distributor. I'm gonna put genre on the x-axis because I want to be able to look at one distributor. Make it a bar plot. I want to be able to look at one distributor and say, what was that distributor's breakdown of movies? Anytime I make a bar plot, I'm basically always doing a cohort flip. I think I've neglected to filter not is in a distributor. And I'd probably like to put the scales equals, let's put the x-axis on a free scale so they can each be, here we go. All right. One thing we learned from this is most of the movies, it's actually a little bit easier to read this if I give each of them a fill and then I tell it not to write a legend. All right, most of the other we have are action, vast majority. I actually had expected most horror movies to come from other. I expected it to be other to be shifted towards horror movies, but I was completely wrong. It looks like a lot of horror movies come from Sony and Universal. Okay, little more rarely for 20th Century Fox. Okay, other than that, not a huge difference. The action one pops out. Adventure movies are usually major distributors. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, knowing about those counts was pretty useful. Knowing horror is always the rarest, but especially rare in other, is really useful. Okay. Now I'm going to go on to I'm going to move back to the questions about payout. So horror on median, the biggest payout, especially in the last couple of years. Again, we can't divide this down by distributor. I'm going to return the question of let's ask what were the highest money making. This is actually a graph I probably should have made it first. Is I'd probably in a blog post I would say, wow, horror movies have been very profitable in the last few years. What were some of those profitable horror movies? And I would take it and say, let's filter down. Let's say filter for genre is, and I just realized how I'm going to be showing this over time. I think this is going to be a pretty neat graph, but let's find out. If I filter for horror, I really can't see the names of these. Arrange in descending profit ratio. Quickly pipe this to view. What I see really is Paranormal Activity, Blair Witch Project, Halloween, movies from all over our spectrum, and I'm interested. Are a lot of these recent, or what are the recent ones that are driving this? I'm not seeing a lot of them. I'm not seeing. I was thinking maybe there'd be a lot of movies around 2014 that had huge ratios. I don't think that's necessarily what's happening. Let's graph this a bit. Well, I'm going to actually start by saying, let's have a data set called horror movies. Let's take the top 10 and let's ggplot them. Let's say movie, movie and profit ratio, and make it a bar plot, cohort flipped, and I know I'm going to need to reorder that movie. That's a pretty good looking graph. You know, it's Halloween, so I'm probably going to want to do a little bit of coloring on this. I'm going to say fill equals orange makes sense to me. And I usually don't, I say ratio of, let's make this a blog post ready graph of worldwide gross to production budget. Is that a spooky orange? It's not the most spooky orange, but it'll do. I'm going to bring in my scale Y. I'm going to bring in that X. I kind of like that such and such times. And in the title, I'd say, what horror movies have most outgrossed their budget? That's a reasonable title. Maybe I could think of a better one. And yeah, we get a top 10 from this that range from 100 times, 200 times, 300 times. I could put this on a log scale. It would be realistic to do that. But when we're looking at the top few, it is kind of important to know. It's important for a studio to know that Blair Witch Project and Paranormal Activity made far more than any others. I made this orange, but I could have, as an alternative, I could have said, let's make color equal distributor. If I wanted to say, ooh, what distributors made all this money? I actually wanted to use fill equals distributor. Which distributors made all the money from these movies? And we see that combination, Paramount for some of them, Universal for others. All right. So that's somewhat interesting. Now, I just realized I filtered for horror movies in this, but I might want to work backwards. I know I already saw that some of the most money-making movies, especially of recent time, were horror. But I could make a variation to this plot, where instead of graphing just horror, I graph all movies. I graph the most outgrossing movies, and I'm going to put this in the section about where I'm already talking a little bit about what genres make the most money. And I do it with all movies. I say movie profit, arrange in descending profit ratio. 10, and I say fill equals genre. And I ask myself the question, of these top movies, what tends to be overrepresented? And we see 5 of them are horror movies, 3 of them are dramas. Adventure movies don't make this. It's probably because they tend to have high budgets and also high, like high budget, high return, but not you don't get these same crazy ratios. All right. Whenever I make a graph like this, I sometimes realize we probably want 20 items. We want 20 items on it. All right. So if we saw that at a higher median, but not by a crazy amount. Having said that, I notice a lot of these are recent. A lot of the horror movies are recent. We could look at this. We could look at this only in a recent period of history. We saw a bit of a change in 2013. I'm gonna just keep it as it is. We could say what movies have most outgrossed their budget. This is a pretty solid graph. I would say fill equals like the capitalized genre. This could go in a blog post. I'm into this graph. Found out some interesting information. Like I did not know Bambi was this giant hit. That's cool. All right. Learned some things from this graph. And then we could say we saw that horror, we could absolutely make the horror specific version of this, probably extend it to 20 movies and share this version, and then color could represent distributor. That's one way that we can represent this. I'd probably also add to this movie. I notice I keep talking about time. I probably want to throw in the release year for every one of these movies. I probably want to say, let's take movie and year of release date. That's a good looking graph. You see these kinds of things a lot where people throw in a year. Not a particularly unusual number of recent movies, especially given that's what our data set is biased towards. But yeah, that's a solid looking graph. I could also scatter plot this. So what I can do is I can actually say, let's put, I'm gonna maybe start by doing it for all horror and maybe then do it for all movies. I'm gonna kind of play it by ear. I'm gonna make horror movies its own chunk, and then I'm gonna take this, put release date on the x-axis, put profit ratio on the y-axis. I'm absolutely going to scale y log 10, but that's me doing things a bit out of order. I'm going to geom point, and I'm probably going to filter. We have so few movies before 1990. I really think it's not a great idea to include all that time period. I was going to say horror movies since 1990. What has been standing out in terms of a profit ratio? And one more thing. Adjusted horror movies. All right, I'm going to try adding in titles. When you add in titles onto a crowded graph like this, you absolutely need check overlap equals true. And I say label equals movie. And I adjust them to not overlap each. Here we go. And I notice this upward trend. When I see an upward trend, I like to throw in a geom, really any kind of trend. I like to throw in a fit and see how's it been changing. Last thing is I really like my earlier idea of putting this X onto each. So I'm going to throw that into here on the x-axis. Like, doesn't seem to work. Oh, I see. I need to put the labels into the same scale, log 10, that I'm already using. All right, this is an informative graph. What I notice here is like, we used to sometimes see like a tenfold making back your budget, or it's probably a fivefold or so. Or here, I know what you did last summer, a big summer hit, but then we saw Blair Witch Project changed a lot, and then we saw more and more movies in the 2000 to 2010 that made back more of their budget. In fact, when I have the graph like this, I really realize that I need a break at, wow, these are some really wasteful, there's some wasted space down here. I'm just going to go ahead and filter for your profit ratio needs to be, come on, more than 0.01 maybe. Oh, 0.11 and 10. I'm going to start here. And yeah, let me see. All right, and 100. Yeah, that's a better looking graph already. What I can say here is, whoop, look at that. We have an upward trend. Some of these movies, yeah, really kind of making a lot more than they used to. And some of these might be driving that difference where horror movies are making more profit than other types. All right. If I made this for all movies and I colored it by genre, how different would it look? You see, and I say, I'm going to have only one trend. I don't love the idea of a trend for every genre. And I say color equals genre. I might come back to a trend for every genre. I'm going to play it by ear a little bit here. What happens is we're way too crowded. Oh, that's actually exactly the thing I was interested in. That overall it's flat. Even though for horror it was going up. I'm going to try getting one trend line for each of our genres. Still too crowded a graph, but it's going to help us pull out what we might be interested in saying. Let me see. Oh, the one trend line is going to have to go right here. Color equals genre. Too crowded, I might start faceting. Ooh, look at that. Horror being the one that goes up. I'm going to go ahead and facet. I'm going to facet wrap by, I'm going to drop color. I might put it back in. And facet wrap by genre. This might be an interactive graph because we're getting really crowded here. Action, adventure, comedy, drama, horror. Aha. So we're very much seeing this story. Horror movies have started a trend of making back a lot more than they put in. In fact, dramas might be negative, maybe not. It's very hard to tell. That's really cool. I think that's pretty informative. I'm going to I'm going to try making this interactive. I'm going to do, let's save this as a graph G, and library ggplotly. Pardon me, it's library plotly. And ggplotly on this graph. See how this looks? Wonder if ggplotly supports, oh, check overlap. If it doesn't, it does not. That's really good to know. Ooh, am I going to crash our studio? I hope not. What happened is, it looks like ggplotly may not support check overlap equals true. I'd never tried it before. And that's a bit better. And the reason I want to make it interactive is people may want to zoom in on particular movies. Right now, if they zoom in, it's not going to tell them much. It'll just tell them the release date and the profit ratio. But if I throw in one more aesthetic, I saw this last week and I need to remember what it is. I think if I do, I'm not 100% sure on this. I think if I say label equals movie. Nope, that's not going to work. Oh, maybe I need to, if I do it up here, perhaps it'll work. Oh, I like it better. And I make this interactive. This would be one way of expressing what we learned is we could say, oh, I notice each of these are flat in terms of the release date and the ratio, the ratio of the worldwide budget to the production budget, but horror has been going up. And a lot of it is driven by these extremes, like a Paranormal Activity, like The Devil Inside and Unfriended and Split and Get Out. These movies with fairly low budgets that became blockbuster hits. And we get also look through some of the others. We learned that movies like Open Water, which I'm... Oh, right, that was the shark one. Yeah, so some of these low-budget movies, Chasing Amy, Open Water, Pokemon 3, Napoleon Dynamite, Full Monty, some of these movies, but they kind of are flat throughout time, whereas horror, they've been kind of cracking open this formula of the low-budget blockbuster. That's really interesting. All right. Well, that's all the time we have. There's a lot of things I didn't explore. If I added a future work to the end here, I'm going to throw it all the way in the end. I didn't look at domestic versus worldwide budget. I bet we'd find that there's versus worldwide revenue. I bet we'd find that there's different ratios of worldwide to domestic, and that, for example, action movies and horror movies may play unusually well overseas, while drama tends to be more focused in the U.S. It's possible. We didn't look at ratings, at MPAA ratings. It's well known that R-rated movies tend to make less money because they're restricted who can enter. I wonder how that plays into horror. Have these horror movies that make all this money cracked open some of the ways to make a highly rated a highly money-making R-rated movie. And we haven't tried a predictive model. I suspect if we combined genre, release date, and studio, we would be able to, and production budget, we'd be able to get some sense of predictions in terms of the expected amount of profit. Having said that, I think from the data we have here, there's very little we could do to say what's the next blockbuster. We'd probably want to look at a lot of other things. We could look at the script. We could look at subgenres. We could look at the actors. There would be a more interesting and useful model if we wanted to say, let's predict the next blockbuster. Having said that, I'd say we definitely got across in telling a story about how horror movies have recently become increasing money makers in the last couple of years. So, thanks very much for joining me. I look forward. I hope you watch the next screencast where I'll be analyzing next week's Tidy Tuesday data. And happy Halloween!